So Don picked this theme that I think is really enlightening. Because if you know anything about Don, we call him the Weather Don. He's a passionate kind of guy, and his theme is leading with your passion. So Don, tell us first why you picked this theme.
Well, I think my whole life has been built around a passion for weather. And most people who get to know me recognize that, I am who I am. My focus is on solving a really tough problem. And that's the challenges of understanding how to forecast the weather and communicate that in a way that's going to improve outcomes. And it all started when I was 7 years old. And really that's what drives me. And so everything I do revolves around that, and the way I operate and the way I work with people, and my true internal way of behaving is all around this passion for weather. And so once you have a passion and a vision for something, it's really easy to stay on principles and follow through. And that gives me a lot of authenticity with my coworkers and my colleagues and my partners once they get to know me.
Well, what I think is really incredible is that as early as the age of 7, you already had a passion for weather, which I just find it to be really unique. So let's go back in time, Don, and let's talk about in the beginning. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and your childhood. And I know we have a really cool slide with some pictures that will roll while you're talking. So go ahead, Don. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, well, I grew up in New York City, in Queens. It was a pretty typical family lifestyle in Queens. I had a very active lifestyle because I lived in an area where back in the early 1970s, it was relatively safe. At 8 years old, I was running around the neighborhood like I owned it. I didn't have parents helicopter parenting me, which was probably good. I think that's what really helped grow me as a person I am. I had to deal with a lot of different challenges. I was a Met fan, and we had Yankee fans in New York City. And if you were in Queens and you were a Yankee fan, you had to deal with that. And if you're in the Bronx and you're a Met fan, you had to deal with that. And it was tough. It was a tough upbringing. But weather really drove me, because we had a snowstorm in 1969. It was the Lindsay Day snowstorm. And that I just wanted to understand, how this happened and why it happened. And I used to listen to Joel Myers on AccuWeather back in on 1010 Winds. This was in the beginning when AccuWeather was the first weather company that really took National Weather Service products and tried to customize it and do better forecasting. And that all came together at the same time with my interests, and the media was starting to get more involved in weather. And I just feel very fortunate that that I really landed on this at such a young age.
Those pictures were amazing, and I could just imagine the little Don sitting at the window watching the snowstorm, thinking to himself, I wonder why this is all happening. And so there was a picture in that collage, Don, where you had a chef hat on, and your partner in crime and colleague, Lisa, told me I have to ask you about this story. Tell me about the jelly in your veins story, where you're in this baker's hat, and how it's weather related.
Well, so that was in college. As I grew up, I knew I wanted to be a meteorologist. There's a lot of diaries and things that I think you have pictures of that I used to write when I was a kid. I even wrote a report in 7th grade of what about a career, and I had to do my research on meteorologists, and so I wrote that report. But the thing is I was going to college. I was going to SUNY at Oneonta for my meteorology degree, but in the summer I was working at Dunkin Donuts. And what was interesting is, I always do anything I did, I always did the best I could do, right? And I learned as a baker in Dunkin Donuts, especially in the 1970s, when we used to bake the donuts on premise, and we used to have to cut them all and fry them all. And I learned pretty quickly that, you had to get your donuts to rise a certain amount. Otherwise, you get the screen marks on them and they become greasy. And the proof boxes that they gave us and the instructions they gave us they were just very black and white. And I learned working over the course of a summer that the humidity changes outside meant that you had to change the way you let your dough rise. And I wouldn't even put my donuts in the humidifier on some days. And they would come in and yell at me, go, why aren't you putting those in the humidifier? I said, because this is going to be fine. Just trust me. So I actually figured out, I had the best donuts on Long Island, according to my district manager. And I had a finisher who was used to take the donuts and have to put the jelly in them and all that. And I used to yell at her if she was squeezing my donuts too much, because she was going to cause them to get flat and they wouldn't look good in the case. So after 2 years of working at Dunkin Donuts, Mickey came up to me, who had a glass eye. You know, he was one of these guys right out of Central Casting, right?
You can't even make this stuff up.
Can't make this stuff up. He had a glass eye. He sits me at the counter. I said, I have to go back to school, Mickey, now, senior year. And he goes, Don, I don't think you should do this. I'll get you set up. You can build the weather programs up at Dunkin Donuts University. I didn't even know there was a Dunkin Donuts University, right? And you can make sure that everyone understands how to use. He said, you can't go back to school. You have jelly in your veins. And so after I explained to him, Mickey, I love donuts. I love working for you, but you know, I have to go back to school now and be a meteorologist. He understood, and that was the last I ever saw Mickey.